Welcome to Ethical Point. This is the explainer where we completely decode the complexities of philosophy, ethics, and public administration. I'm your mentor for today, and joining me to tackle the GS Paper 4 syllabus is your resident student and, honestly, your biggest skeptic. Look, I'm ready to learn, but before we dive into all this heavy theory about an ethical workplace, I've got to ask, why does this actually matter? I mean, we look at massive real-world disasters like the PNB scam, and it just feels like the entire system completely failed. Well, that is a brilliant place to start. See, the PNB scam wasn't just a rogue businessman doing his thing. It happened because of a massive collective failure. Bank employees, regulatory bodies, they completely ignored ethical guidelines. The workplace environment itself failed. And that, right there, is exactly why building an ethical workplace is literally the bedrock of civil services. So let's dive into this and break it down systematically for your exam.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We're going to hit the anatomy of an ethical workplace, look at breaking that old colonial mindset, decode ethics versus conduct, explore citizen empowerment, figure out how to measure service quality, and finally structure all of this into a high-scoring mains answer.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the anatomy of an ethical workplace, well beyond a corporate sphere.
When we talk about an ethical workplace in the corporate world, we're usually just talking about serving a specific client base, right? But in the civil services, it's a whole different ballgame. You're touching the lives of 1 billion people. You're trying to fulfill the needs and aspirations of an entire nation. The stakes are just infinitely higher.
Okay, hold on. Before we get too deep into the philosophy here, can we just do a quick layman's pause? If I get a 10 marker on this, what is the absolute simplest, most direct definition I can write down?
Fair enough. The core definition you need is this. An ethical workplace is simply an organization where employees carry out their official duties according to acceptable standards. That's it. Keep that standard foolproof definition in your back pocket for your intro.
All right, moving right along to Section 2, breaking the colonial mindset. From masters to public servants. So, to really understand modern administrative reforms, we've got to look at our history. The Indian civil services inherited a very specific and, honestly, a pretty problematic legacy. You're talking about the British legacy, right? That whole my bop culture? Precisely. The colonial-era bureaucracy thrived on opacity. They were quite literally legally protected by things like the Official Secrets Act of 1923. And those administrators really viewed themselves as the masters. Right, but what's expected of us today is the exact opposite. It's all about transparency, proactive disclosure, and being genuinely citizen-centric. We aren't the masters anymore, we're public servants. Spot on. The modern civil servant absolutely has to dismantle that old wall of secrecy.
Okay, Section 3, codes, ethics versus conduct, or rules versus leadership.
Yes, please clarify this. Code of ethics versus code of conduct. They sound completely identical to me. Time for another layman's pause? Gladly. Think of the code of ethics as very broad and aspirational. It sets the highest possible boundary for behavior. We're talking big values like integrity, empathy, and compassion. Now contrast that with the code of conduct. That is rigid, it's disciplinary, it's a very strict list of do's and don'ts. Ah, okay, I get it now. So ethics tells me I should, have integrity. But conduct specifically tells me I cannot accept a lavish gift from a contractor. Exactly. Ethics is the destination you're aiming for. Conduct is the map that keeps you from driving off a cliff along the way.
But wait, surely just writing these codes down in some dusty manual isn't enough, right? I mean, the PNB scan happened and they had manuals. Hit the nail on the head. Implementation is the crucial part. You can have the best written codes in the world, but if top-level executives aren't leading by personal example, those codes are just paper. A truly ethical workplace requires leaders to actively train their staff on navigating real ethical dilemmas. And there's got to be zero tolerance for violations, right? Plus, actual protection for whistleblowers. If someone spots a conflict of interest, they need to feel 100% safe reporting it. Absolutely. Values have to be inculcated into the team, not just blindly enforced.
Which brings us to Section 4, empowering citizens, RTI and charters.
We've talked a lot about internal rules, but how do we force an ethical workplace from the outside in? Well, the Right to Information Act of 2005 completely changed the game here. But hey, don't just memorize the sections for the exam, look really closely at its preamble objectives.
Let's see. Create an informed citizenry, ensure transparency, contain corruption, and make the government accountable to the people.
Right. The RTI is basically the primary tool for citizens to hold public authorities accountable.
When a civil servant knows their decisions can literally be reviewed by any citizen for a 10-rupee fee, the workplace naturally becomes a whole lot more objective and ethical.
Okay, the RTI makes total sense. But what exactly is a citizen's charter? Can we get one more layman's pause for this one?
You got it.
A citizen's charter is a written, voluntary declaration by a service provider. It essentially tells the citizen, hey, here is the standard of service you can expect from us, here is exactly how you access it, and here is how you complain if we mess up. It's basically a promise of quality.
And a good charter really bridges the gap between the government and the governed. It's way more than just a fluffy vision statement. It includes hard timeframes for services and a crystal-clear grievance redressal mechanism.
You know, it's interesting that the last point is expectations from citizens.
Yes, because governance is a two-way street. Think about the income tax department. Their charter commits to processing your returns quickly, but it also totally expects citizens to file honest returns on time.
Now, here's the catch. Even with the RTI and a perfect citizen's charter, there is an invisible layer that dictates absolutely everything. Work culture.
Ah, the unwritten rules.
Exactly. It's the standard practices, the traditions, the unwritten beliefs of the office. A sound work culture encourages healthy discussion, treats everyone equally, and supports both the high performers and the laggards. Without a good work culture, formal codes usually just fail.
All right, Section 5, Service Quality and Public Funds, Measuring Performance and Integrity. Okay, so all this theory really has to translate to reality, right? Take the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Massive public funds are poured into it, but reports constantly show high disparities and poor learning outcomes. That is real administrative friction. So my big question here is, how do we actually objectively measure this gap between what a department is doing and what the citizen actually expects?
I am so glad you asked that. To answer that in your exam, you want to use the SERVQUAL model. It systematically assesses 5 dimensions. Tangibles. Are the facilities adequate? Reliability. Is the performance dependable? Responsiveness. Is the service prompt? Assurance. Do the employees inspire trust? And empathy. Do they provide caring, individualized attention? Oh, that's a brilliant framework. So if a government hospital has a beautiful new building, the tangibles, but the doctors just don't show up, the reliability, then the overall service quality completely fails.
Exactly. Now, to deliver any of these services, you need money. And we have a very clear constitutional mandate for the ethical utilization of public funds. We've got Article 112 for the annual financial statement, Article 266 for the consolidated and public accounts, and 267 for the contingency fund.
And it's crucial we get this right because the risks of financial misappropriation are huge.
Massive. In a developing nation like India, where 10 to 20% of our GDP goes straight into government procurement, wasting public funds isn't just a tiny accounting error. It's a profound ethical failure that literally denies basic rights to the most vulnerable people.
Finally, Section 6, Mastering the Mains Answer, Structuring for Success.
All right, I need the secret sauce here. How do we structure all this incredible theory into a high-scoring answer for GS Paper 4? Well, first off, you want to anchor your answers with real authority. Listen to this absolute killer quote from Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel's 1947 Metcalfe House speech. He said, "The days when the service could be masters were over, and the officers must be guided by the real spirit of service." Wow, okay, that is a seriously high-impact quote for a conclusion, right? Memorize this one. Using the Iron Man of India to conclude an answer on public service ethics shows immense depth and historical context to the examiner.
Now, here is your concrete, actionable blueprint for structuring a 10 or 15 marker. Start your intro with standard, crisp definitions, just like the layman's terms we used for ethical workplace or integrity.
Then for the body paragraph, I apply those frameworks, like using the SERVQUAL model to analyze a case study about, say, a failing public school or a corrupt bank branch.
Spot on. Then, for your way forward section, really emphasize that we need ethical leadership and a strong work culture, not just a bunch of new rules. And finally, bring it all home in the conclusion by anchoring it with a visionary quote, like the one from Sardar Patel.
So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to really ponder for your ethical case studies. Can an organization truly be ethical if its formal codes are absolutely perfect, but its leaders completely fail to lead by example?
That's the ultimate crux of paper IV, isn't it? The difference between the strict letter of the law and the true spirit of leadership.
It absolutely is. Think deeply about that as you practice your answer writing this week. Thanks for joining us on Ethical Point, and keep analyzing, keep questioning, and keep striving for that spirit of service.